Welcome to the program, Meaningful Interviews. I'm here with Rabbi Dovid Eliezrie, the head of Shliach of Chabad in Orange County, somewhere, I think, Yorba Linda.
Yeah, Yorba Linda, California.
Yorba Linda, California. But more importantly for this interview, Rabbi Dovid just published this book, Undaunted, about the life of the Frierdiker Rebbe and his tremendous work in Russia, saving Yiddishkeit, Judaism, continuing in America, and we'll hear about that later. In addition to that, Reb Dovid is someone who has walked the halls of very important people globally, from Eretz Yisrael, Israel, to Russia, to the United States, with the statesmen, politicians, and really a globetrotter, I really mean this, David, who's on behalf of Yiddishkeit to make a difference at the Jewish agencies, part of the board as far as I remember, and things that most Chabad rabbis and shluchim don't do, and David has managed to do them, and I think that speaks very much about his talents and dedication to the Jewish people, where he's not just limiting himself to his work in Yorba Linda, which is his bread and butter, of course, but really a shliach to so many other global Jewish issues that are so important, especially today with anti-Semitism on the rise, which I think I read that you were also.
I wish my mother was alive to hear everything you said.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but David, it's true. I'm not, if it's not true, I wouldn't say it. So I want to begin, David, with a background of your family, your yeshiva training, the people you met during those years, and then your marriage, who your wife is. Just give us, who is this Dovid Eliezrie?
Who is Dovid Eliezrie? He's this. That's an interesting question. That's the ultimate question we have to ask: who is ourselves?
Right.
Because the challenge of life is to realize who you really are and what you really can do, and everybody has unique gifts, and how can you use them in a positive kind of way?
Especially today, it's a Yutas Kislev Dr. Rebbe said Ayekod, right? He was asked,
where are we? We have to know where we are. We have to know where we are and what we can accomplish.
Okay, so
the short answer is I grew up in Los Angeles, where I attended a modern Orthodox day school, Hill Hebrew Academy, where they taught me Ivrit B'Ivrit, which was, they said, V'yomer Hashem B'Hashem Amar. I was a little bit as a kid. It was in the 50s and the 60s, in a time when this was the style of education, and I didn't excel in the Ivrit B'Ivrit. But when I was about 14 years old, my family moved to Montreal, and the yeshiva down the block was a Lubavitch yeshiva, literally about 150 yards from the house. And that time, kids from all kinds of backgrounds would attend the yeshiva, not just Chabad kids. And I went to Lubavitch yeshiva, and I became very close with the students. And there was not only a elementary school and a high school, but there was a yeshiva gadola. There was a higher level rabbinical school, and I became very close with the yeshiva students. I used to learn with them and study with them, and they, so to speak, moved me in, and they brought me to the Rebbe. And then in 1968, my family moved to Israel, and I went to Kfar Chabad, to Chabad Yeshiva, where I spent 5.5 years. And then afterwards, I came back to America, and I got married, and I spent 8 years on Shlichus in Florida at the University of Miami. I was one of the early campus shluchim. My whole generation, except for one, Aaron Goldstein in Michigan, the rest of us, we all went into campus work, and then we moved into community work. We had no support system. When we turned up on campus, they looked at us like we dropped out of a UFO, or they thought we were going to sing Fiddler on the Roof or something like that.
Right.
And then eventually I went back to California. My wife is from California, and went to Orange County, and we've developed a beautiful campus and center in Orange County. So that's basically, and we had the first great grandchild about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So we've hit the big time now. We've hit the big time. So I've already informed the great grandchild I'm planning on dancing at her chuppah.
Amen. So I want to ask you a few questions on what you said. One is, your parents and grandparents, they came from where in Europe? I assume
They came
Europe.
from England, and then before that from Europe. They were part of that. Jews from Eastern Europe immigrated to England, and they came from there here to America.
And were they Hasidic, coming from
No,
Hasidic
they were just
background?
traditional Jews. But when you realize how many kids went to an Orthodox day school in the late 50s and early 60s in Los Angeles, you could count those kids on a few dozen. It was very, very rare in those days for kids to go to yeshiva like
So
I did.
you went where to which school, which modern Orthodox school in
Hill,
LA?
it's still a wonderful school. It's called Hill Hebrew Academy. It's in
Right.
LA on Beverly Hills. It's a wonderful
Rabbi
school.
Ivry, was Rabbi Ivry there?
There was, I think that there was the head of the school was Rabbi Gottesman.
Rabbi Goddess.
It was a wonderful school, and I was very much enriched by that educational experience. But then I moved in when I was about 14 years old. I went to Lubavitch Yeshiva, and
Right.
About between 14, I was not 14 or 15. I'm not sure exactly. I came to the Rebbe the first time. I met with the Rebbe, and I got a little special attention from the Rebbe also, and that, so to speak, put me in a different direction in life, and I became eventually a full-fledged
Right.
Lubavitcher and a shliach.
Right. Let me ask you this: how many you have any siblings?
I have one sister, and I have 6 children that are Baruch Hashem all married, and a couple of married grandchildren. One of them has already gone on Shlichus. The other one is about to go on Shlichus. And we already have a 3rd generation entering the same business. So I don't think it's a business. I think it's a mission.
Yeah,
it's a
don't
calling
say it's
in
a
life.
business.
What?
It's not a business. It's a holy thing.
It's a holy thing. It's a calling in life. And we are very, as I tell my wife always, we are extremely uniquely blessed by our children and our grandchildren, and now the first great-grandchild.
Okay, so you've seen, you were in Kfar Chabad. You learned by Reb Shlomo Chaim.
I studied in Kfar Chabad, and I really studied in a very unique period in Kfar Chabad, because those who know the history of Chabad knows that Chabad was molded, and the students in the Lubavitch yeshivas were molded by great mashpiyim. Mashpiyim are people who are spiritual mentors, and their responsibility, in a classical yeshiva, you have a Rosh Yeshiva, a great Torah scholar, and he has the intellectual acumen and knowledge and great mastery of Talmudic scholarship and learning. But in a Chabad yeshiva, there is also a mashpia, and a mashpia's job, a responsibility, I don't know if it's a job, is to be a role model of values and ideals, of spirituality, of holiness, and at the same time mold those students. So I lived in 2 generations of mashpiyim, which were radically different. And in my first book, The Secret of Chabad, I have a chapter there called The Yeshiva, and I contrast the 2 mashpiyim, which was Reb Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, who was a mashpiyah for over 50 years, and I was there in the last few years of his life, and I was actually at his funeral. And then, after he passed away, the Rebbe did, I think, what you call up in baseball a change-up. He sent Reb Mendel Futafas. Now, Reb Shlomo Chaim's focus was on davening and learning, and he was a man that would daven every day till 11:30, 12 o'clock. He was immersed in Hasidic philosophy. He would keep students up all through the night with his masterful farbrengens full of insight and wisdom and deep spiritual content. And then the Rebbe sent, after he passed away, and he had been a mashpia, he had this role in Chabad yeshivas for 50 years. Generations of Hasidim were educated underneath Reb Shlomo Chaim, and his focus has always been primarily on avoda, which means service through prayer, and the spiritual core of who you are as a person. Because in Chabad, the focus is really, it's an interesting thing. In Chabad, we don't tell somebody you're a great Torah scholar. We say to him, you're a pnimi, you're a person who's internalized values. And what Reb Shlomo Chaim did was focus on this internalization. Comes Reb Mendel Futafas. Now, first thing you have to understand the difference. Reb Shlomo Chaim had spent, was an academic. He had been, I think, arrested once in Russia for a short period of time, but he was a man immersed in scholarship. And from the time he got out of Russia, from the mid, like 1946, 47, he had I was in yeshiva until the early 70s when he passed away. He was spent, and even before that, he was a mashpia in the yeshiva in Russia. So in the secret underground yeshiva, so his whole world was Jewish learning and scholarship. As we explain, the expression in Hebrew is Ba'ohel Shel Torah, in the tent of Torah. Then comes Reb Mendel Futafas. Now, who was Reb Mendel? He was a communal activist. He had been instrumental in organizing, the work of Chabad in Russia. He had been one of the key figures in what I call in both of my books, the Great Escape, where a group of 1,000 Hasidim escaped Russia on false passports between 1946 and 1947. When you think there was never such a thing in the history of the Soviet Union, 1,000 people got out of that so-called prison without them, and at the end, he was arrested for that and sent off to Siberia for 9 years. So you walked into yeshiva every single day and you looked at a man who had spent almost a decade of his life in one of the harshest prison environments in the world. We're not talking about going to an American prison. I've been to American prisons visiting prisoners. We're talking about Siberia, that if you finally escape, what are you going to do? March across the tundra? I mean, this is the end of the world. And we would look, and this was a man who exemplified to us self-sacrifice, standing up for principles, Hasidic ideas. And really, he was, while Shlomo Chaim focused on Aveda, the internal spiritual service, Reb Mendel focused on being Mekusher and connected in a stronger way to the Rebbe. It was a different message. And he wanted us, I remember there was a famous first Farbrengen, when he comes there, and he would say, okay, guys, what are you doing here? You got to go to New York. I mean, like he came like a tsunami and shifted the direction of the yeshiva. And I think the Rebbe made a calculated choice because the Rebbe, I think, was his primary goal was to transform Judaism in the world, and he needed foot soldiers. And the students from the yeshiva could be the foot soldiers. So Rav Shlomo Chaim had instilled into us the internal values, and Rav Mendel challenged us to be the foot soldiers. Mm-hmm. And when we looked at him, and I always think through my life, when you go in Shlichus, there's always difficulties and hardships. You have to raise money, you have to do this. And I always think to myself, whatever difficulties I face, they pale in comparison to somebody like Rav Mendel, who, because of what he did secretly in Russia, he was sent off to Siberia.
So would you say that, looking back now, the person that touched you most or formed your ideas was Reb Mendel Futerfas?
I think so.
The Rebbe, I'm not talking about the Rebbe.
I think the one that instilled in me the sense of idealism, I think both of them played a very important role in my personal development. Because from Rav Shlomo Chaim, I learned the idea that you have to be the concept of being a pnimi, a person who's internalized Hasidic values, means you have to be a true person. In other words, a lot of us put on a good show. We can put on a nice suit. We can put on good clothes. We can play the part. We can do the act.
Right.
Shlomo Chaim demanded from us a real sense of working within ourselves to realize what our true inner qualities is. And Reb Mendel said, "Okay, guys, now you got to go do something." So I think I was very fortunate to really experience these two very different teachers. And in my first book, The Secret of Chabad, I argue that they also represent the transformation of the Chabad community from one that is focused internally on spiritual accomplishment, not spiritual accomplishment, but working with yourself on a spiritual level, not that you're becoming a great person. And the second one that said, okay, we have to change the Jewish world. In truth, the Rebbe wanted to do both, but there's human beings are limited with their capacity, and I think there's a degree of trade-off. Let's be very realistic. But I think I was a very fortunate person. I think Reb Mendel had a greater influence over me than Reb Shlomo Chaim. There's no question about it. And my shul always knows I tell them stories of Reb Mendel. They're used to that. But I think I was a very fortunate person to have multiple role models in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to your days in Montreal, you said you went into the Lubavitch Yeshiva in Montreal at what age? 14, right?
I went into Lubavitch Yeshiva at 14, yeah.
And you were there till what, 17, 18?
Till 16, 2 years.
Oh, 2 years. So who touched you there?
I think it was a combination
from modern Orthodox to Lubavitch.
I think the one who took the greatest personal interest in me was the principal, Rabbi Fegelstock. And him, I owe the greatest personal debt. He took me to New York the first time. And I was also very close with many of the yeshiva students. So hanging around those young, vibrant, dynamic rabbinic. I used to study with one of the. Listen, my level of learning was lower than the kids in Lubavitch Yeshiva, so I had some of the Bachram would tutor me to uplift my level. So I would go every day, once, a couple times a week. I'd go over to the yeshiva and sit with the Bachram. So I was very impressed by their energy, by their passion, by their sense of mission and their scholarship. And so a whole different, each one of them touched me in different ways. And I think I was close with Label Kaplan, who, when he was sent off to Australia in 1966, he was my pen pal, which was interesting to itself. But there was a whole group of yeshiva students, and that environment of young, passionate people who care about Yiddishkeit, who are involved with Jewish scholarship and learning. And Montreal was also filled with a tapestry of very rich Hasidic personalities, Rabbi Galitsky and Rabbi Kramer and Rabbi Greenglass. Not that I really understood Peretz Mochkin, not that I really understood them at that point in my life, but they were just very important. And then on the side, the yeshiva boys, us high school kids in the yeshiva, fielded the best hockey team in the Jewish league in town, and we won the championship. And played a game in the Montreal Forum.
So
not that I was the best player. I was not the best player. There was guys better than me.
So the transition from modern Orthodoxy, the way you were raised, in Hillel and all that, to Chabad, was it difficult for you or not?
It wasn't difficult. It was an evolutionary process. And it really got clenched when I got to Israel. I thought the yeshiva had a high school also, when I got a surprise that it didn't. So it was the middle of the year, and it was suggested to me by one of the people in the administrative office of the yeshiva, why don't you just try it out for a few months? And I tried it out. And once I did that, I must admit that this is what I tell people all the time. I never finished high school, but I got a much better education in Chabad Yeshiva than anybody who went to Harvard.
So how was it being in Eretz Yisrael after the 6-Day War?
It was exciting. It was dynamic. There's an expression in Hebrew called alagova. You felt there was an energy in this country. We won the war. Everybody was very optimistic. It was a very dynamic and vibrant time. I mean, economically and social. I mean, it was a time when if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to buy a telephone token, which was good for 20 seconds. You'd put in the tokens, you'd call the person up, hello, hello. And by the time you begin the conversation, all the tokens were gone. It was technologically, let's say, handicapped as a country.
Right.
But there was a sense of excitement there. And I left just before the Yom Kippur War. So I was not there for the Yom Kippur War. So I was there between the wars. And it was just a very exciting and optimistic time to be in Israel.
Mm-hmm. What about the Baal Tshuva? Did you see the Baal Tshuva movement start?
So one of the things that I was involved with at that point is around 1970. I was just a kid in yeshiva, 71. I remember the exact year. I was one of the people who helped out starting the Chabad house in the old city of Jerusalem, in the famous Tzemach Tzedek shul, which is the Chabad shul. And the truth of the matter is that it was my dream to return to Israel after I got married and run that Chabad house. But after the Yom Kippur War, the powers to be came to see me from Jerusalem, and they said, "Listen, we love you, but there's no money. The country was an economic basket case." So I always tell my kids, "You could have been Israelis."
So what year did you marry?
I married in just a few weeks before the Yom Kippur War.
That's 1973, right?
Right.
1973. Now, did you attend the kollel in Crown Heights?
I spent a year in kollel. Yes, I thought this was very important. And then we went off to the University of Miami, where I became one of the early campus shluchim.
Right. 1 second. I want to go back. You said earlier that you had some interesting kiruv with the Rebbe. You want to share? Can you share that?
Well, I'll tell you, the first encounter with the Rebbe was very profound, and I'll tell you what happened. And I've told the story before, but it's a very touching story. I came as a kid. I was like 14 years old. Okay, 15 maybe. And we came to, and the tradition was that on Yud Shvat, which is the anniversary of the passing of the previous Rebbe, the high school kids from Montreal would come, because the previous Rebbe had established the yeshiva, and they would have what's called the Yechidas Kloli Prati. They would have a meeting. They would have a private audience for the 10, 15 kids that came from the high school. They'd have a private audience with the Rebbe. So we did all that. So we were there for the weekend, and I went to the Farbrengen, and I didn't really understand what was going on. I left in the middle, to be very honest. But I felt some kind of a special spirit in the place.
Yeah.
And the last day we were there, I think it was a Sunday or a Monday, a Sunday night or Monday night. I don't recall exactly the day. I decided that we were going to leave in the morning, and we were gonna drive back to Montreal on this bus. Now, of course, yeshiva boys, when they charter a bus, they charter the most rickety school bus that you can get in the existence of the universe. Right. It wasn't like a fancy coach bus or anything like that. But I decided I want to come to Myriv for the evening service and see the Rebbe one more time. So I come to 770, and then the Chabad this time is embryonic. It's small. They had just expanded the shul partially. And I came into 770 on the main floor, and you've been there, and many people who watching this have been there. There's a small shul off to the right. It's not a very large shul. It's actually, I measured it because of my research for the book, it's 620 square feet. Anyway, I come in there. That's where the Rebbe accepted the leadership of Chabad. So I try to get in the room, and it's packed. And I go around the back, and it's packed. So I figured, you know what? I'll stand by the elevator between the Rebbe's office and between the shul, and I'll see the Rebbe when he crosses the hall. Anyway, that's what I did. And the Rebbe walks out of his Garein, what we Chassidim call Garein Atachtin. He walks out of his study. He's walking across the hall, and standing like a sentry at the door of the shul is Rabbi Chodakov, the Rebbe's secretary. And the protocol, which I didn't understand at the time, is that the Rebbe was the last person to walk in the shul. Rabbi Chodakov would close the door. They would daven Mariv or Mincha, whatever the service was, and then the Rebbe would walk out. So I see the Rebbe going across the hall. I see the door open. I'm a little bit of an aggressive individual, and I don't look like the regular Lubavitcher kid at this time. The hat is not black. You know what I mean?
Right.
The hair is not short. Right. I didn't dress exactly more like a modern Orthodox kid.
Right.
And I decide, why not? I'll follow the Rebbe in. So I begin to follow in, and the people there are giving me signs like this: get out. And so the Kav is closing the door, and I'm like a deer caught in the lights, on the highway in the middle of the night, and I'm confused, and there's a tumult, and the Rebbe turns around, and he sees me, the kid that doesn't fit in, that's not a Chabad mold. They say in Yiddish, Nishkin Lubavitcher Schnit. Doesn't fit. He's not part of the program, and he's halfway in and halfway out. And he looks at me and he makes a sign with his hand to Rabbi Chodakov, open the door. And he makes a sign with me, come on down. I should stand next to him. And so that Myriv, he didn't say a word to me. But as I was told by 770 watchers, those guys that have been there forever, it never happened ever again in the next 40 years. The Rebbe would have some teenage kids stand next to him in the middle of davening Myriv. So I felt like he was saying, okay, you are different. That's why I want you to stand next to me.
And when's the next time you had a yichidus with him?
So that happened a few times. These kind of general yichidus. Before I went to Israel, I went to the Rebbe. It was on a Yutas Kislev, as a matter of fact. I went back to New York on my own, and the Rebbe told me that I should go learn in Kfar Chabad. And so when I got to Israel, I told the Rebbe I'm going to Israel, and I'm thinking of going to Kfar Chabad. And the Rebbe said to me I should go to Kfar Chabad, and I went.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 5.5 years of my life there. It was a long time. And at one point, I wanted to leave in the middle, and the Rebbe was very emphatic that I should stay. And I realized what it was. I was looking for a little, a change of pace. And the Rebbe was saying, listen, you still have work to do on yourself. You have to focus on your own spiritual development. Stop running.
Mm-hmm. Were you there when Rabbi Gafni was there?
Yes. And that's what happened, is that I went into his class. I came in, I didn't speak Hebrew. And my level of learning was not necessarily up to the full. So I went into Gafni's program for 2-3 months. By then, I began to pick up a little bit of the Hebrew and the Yiddish. I knew a little Yiddish already. Then I mainstreamed into the regular yeshiva program.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I'll never forget, during that period of time when I first came, that's when also Jonathan Sachs came from Oxford.
Oh, yeah?
And I remember that one Fabrengen late at night, that Gafni stayed up to 3-4 o'clock in the morning, or Gafni trying to convince Sachs not to go back to Oxford. Years later, I was talking to Sachs together with his wife, and I said, "You're very lucky you left for Chabad." He says, "Why is that?" I said, "You'd be running a Chabad house in South London today." And he roared with laughter. Him and his wife started laughing like you wouldn't believe. So, it was an exciting time to be there. Things were new and they were different.
So let me ask you this. Reb Mendel Futterfass comes to Kfar Chabad. My understanding is that the Hasidim, the Lubavitcher Hasidim, then were what we call Dor Hashishi, not Dor Hashvi. In other words, they were really old-fashioned in their mindset. And did you feel at all that they didn't relate to the Rebbe's your food?
I want to say, the Rebbe was a radical. He had made radical changes. I happen to think it's deeper. I happen to feel that at first I don't understand. I was a young kid, so I didn't know what all the politics were going on in the background. But I happen to believe that when the Rebbe sent what's called the Shlichus Kodesh, a series of emissaries, couples and what's his name and younger and yeshiva bachar later.
Yeah, that was later.
Yeah, but that was about 5-6 years later.
Yeah,
it was 4 or 5 years later, and I felt that was Mendel shook up the yeshiva. And I felt that the Rebbe sending 20 couples or 25 couples, another 10, 15 yeshiva
to shake up the whole community.
Was to shake up the whole country, because I don't think the Israelis, I think their horizons were limited. I don't think they had this radical vision that we can be transformational in a whole society. And I think the Americans who came with the panache, that's number one. Number two, a sense of exuberance. And most important, they had spent a lot of years by the Rebbe. They were really top tier students. And I think the Rebbe sent them there to Israel to really shake up the system. So Reb Mendel was the beginning of the shakeup, and the students that came later on, like 4 or 5 years later, they were stage 2 of the shakeup.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's move on now to anything interesting about your marriage that you want to share.
No, Baruch Hashem, 50 years. I'm married over 50 years. I'm on the book tour right now. I'm supposed to go to Grand Cayman on Wednesday night. My wife said, "Can you receive some jewelry back?" I don't think I'm going to do that. But no, we have Baruch Hashem, beautiful family, 6 married children, 22 grandchildren. We are very, very fortunate.
How did you meet her?
I was introduced. People in Yerushalayim who knew both of us introduced us. We met in Israel.
Was she involved at the time in Chabad or not?
She had become religious through the Chabad house in L.A.
Which one, Rabbi Cunan's?
Rabbi Cunan, yes. She was the first person who became from to Chabad in L.A. and became a shliach in California.
Oh, and I remember her name, Estelle, right?
Stella,
right. Well, that's wonderful. Okay, so now you go out on Shlichus after a year in Koilel to Miami on campus. Could you tell? I understand that those days were very difficult.
When I arrived at the University of Miami, it was like, first thing that was a Hillel director at the time who was a radical leftist reform rabbi. And he went to the university and said, "I'm a member of a cult." Well, we had a little bit of problems. And I was trying to get established and make a Chabad house there and everything like this. And they tried to thwart me and stop me in every way, shape, or form. And I also wanted to become a Jewish chaplain on campus. I was the first one that succeeded in the United States. And the way it happened is I finally threatened the university with a federal civil rights lawsuit that discriminated against me. The liberal Jewish establishment was not willing to come to terms that we had alternative ideas and a different way of doing business. And the truth is that we were still, beginning on campus. A lot of my classmates, Rabbi Loshak, Rabbi Felig, Rabbi Darren, our Rabbi Aaron Goldstein, who's still staying strong on campus in Ann Arbor, and others, and Moshe Leader in San Diego. All of us went, in that period of time, and a lot of us went to different campuses. There was not a proper institutional structure. We were experimenting. We were getting kids. Today, Chabad on campus is a powerhouse. It's an extremely professionally run organization. And it's wonderful of the tremendous success of Chabad on campus, and everybody recognizes it today across the Jewish community. But I was coming there in a time when our ideas were looked upon as radical, where Chabad was tiny, where we didn't have, today, and it's interesting, in my role dealing with major Jewish organizations, I deal with the leadership of the American Jewish community. And they all know that we're a big success story today. In fact, there was just a study published by Jewish Federations in North America. And I spoke about it at their conference just a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C. They asked me to speak in a major session, that the primary point of contact, the most popular place that Jews are choosing today since October 7th who want to reconnect with Jewish community is through Chabad. And so the numbers today are astronomical, but in those days, nobody knew us. Oh, who are you? And I would go to the local Reform temple or conservative temple and speak to the kids in the Hebrew school. And we were like a cultural anachronism. We came from the old shtetl and we were cute and we were different. But then we started opening up buildings down the block from them and things changed. But at this point, and we had to fight a battle also for credibility, because people didn't take us seriously. And this was a hard battle. And Baruch Hashem, it's passed. And I have a unique view of this again, because again, I'm dealing here with leadership people in the country, and I see how they feel about us. And even though we may have theological disagreements, there's a tremendous amount of respect for us today among the leadership of the American Jewish community, because success is what it is. But it was a tough time to get started. And also, people on another level is you need to raise money. Today, when you make investments in the stock market, you want to look at a stock that you think is going to rise. And you want to make sure that stock, is going to have value. In those days, nobody knew if the stock of Chabad had value and if its value would rise. And people thought we were a little too religious. So they didn't want to invest in us. Even now, even the most secular Jew says, okay, you guys are a success story. I may not agree with you philosophically. I don't want to give you money. I can understand that. But you can't say that we're not a success story. Mm-hmm. And so fighting those stereotypes, establishing credibility, creating an institutional modality that would work, finding programs that we experimented with different kinds of programs. All of these different things, we were pioneers and we were trying out different things. There was a few that came before us, Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz and Rabbi Stillman, and came to UCLA a few years before. But in the early 70s, a bunch of guys went out to campus and we were like trying things out and getting things moving, but it took a while.
Okay, well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because the Chabad on campus of today seems to me it's not the same Chabad on campus of your time.
No, it is. The guts are the same, but the difference is that you have a kid growing up in suburban, I don't know, Michigan or California today. And if he very possibly he went to Gan Israel Day Camp, and maybe he didn't, but his friend did. Very possibly he went to a Chabad Hebrew school, but if he didn't, he's got a friend who went to a Chabad Hebrew school. Very possibly he went to C-Teens, but if he didn't go to C-Teens, he had a friend that went to C-Teens. Chabad is part of the normal culture. Now he comes to campus. To go to Chabad is like part of life. There's an interesting Facebook page called Mothers Against Anti-Semitism. It's got like 65,000 members. And you read it and they say, oh, there's a great Chabad and Hillel on campus. It's like, this is the way it is. It's like this Ford and GM. In those days, they looked at us like a cheap car that came from Korea that nobody wanted to drive. Now they say we're like Ford and GM. And so this is and so young people today, some of them may say philosophically, I don't agree with Chabad and I want something much more liberal. And I understand that if that's where they're coming from. But at the same time, we're part of the fabric of Jewish life. We're the biggest provider, together with Hillel. The two biggest organizations running Birthright today are Chabad and Hillel. One year we're the biggest, next year they're the biggest, okay? Which is fine. But the point is, when Birthright, I think Birthright, by the way, was the most important test for Chabad on campus. And I'll tell you the reason why. It was the first time that the major Jewish organizations let us compete in an open field. And there was a lot of resistance to letting us do Birthright. And at the beginning, there were 42 different organizations. Birthright is a gun gag. It's a general organization, and they contract with providers, different groups that run the trips. In the beginning, there were 42 organizations. Now it's been whittled down to 12. And of the 12, there's two really big ones, Chabad and Hillel. So we competed in an open marketplace, and the students voted with their feet to go with us. Right. And that is a remarkable statement because nobody's forcing them.
Well, let me ask you this before we have to finish this segment of the interview. How did you get involved, the Kitzer, briefly, and when did you get involved with the major Jewish establishment?
What happened was I saw some problems that we were having on a larger basis.
Yeah.
And I went to Rabbi Krinsky, who was the chairman of Chabad. This is going back 25 years. And I said, Rabbi Krinsky, we have a problem. We have these and these problems. We have to do something about it. So he said, Dovid, go do something. So I started working together with other Jewish organizations. I always was of the opinion that we can't live in a silo. And we also have a responsibility to influence those other organizations. So I started off working on some initiatives that were to ameliorate some problems. And then one thing led to another. And then I started dealing with the Jewish federations in North America, trying to get funding for Chabad programs around the world. And we have, our relationship has been dramatically improved. It's still got a way to go. But a lot of the top tier people are, really wonderful people. and they've been much more open to supporting us, in particular in Ukraine over the last couple of years, and somewhat in Israel, and also locally, Chabad centers are getting approvals, and then beyond that. Eventually, somebody wanted somebody to be on the board of the Jewish Agency for Israel on behalf of Chabad, and I would say the Chachamim and the Vainim, the wise people in Brooklyn, decided I'm the lucky winner, and I get to eat the buffet breakfast on a regular basis. So it happened in a slow, embryonic way. So right now, I deal with the leaders of the religious movements, the Reform, Conservative, and the Orthodox. And we did have a terrible, tragic loss recently. A true partner and a true friend in the head of the OU, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, who was who sat by my side in many different meetings and many different major community issues. And I really knew I had a partner, a man of wisdom and a man of insight and of Yerushalayim and diplomacy, and really a wonderful person. And it's a very big loss. And thank God we've been able to forge some partnerships. There's certain things we can't do because we have certain lines we're not going to cross. But at the same time, it's been a very interesting, I would say, an interesting ride, because it wasn't something I planned on. It just, the responsibilities grew step by step. And
let me ask you. So, from the Chabad perspective, do they really see you as their kind of representative on these issues?
Yes, they do. And not only that, they have for us tremendous respect. And I'll share with you an insight. Once a year, we have a meeting of like 15 major Jewish organizations. We do a Zoom once a month, but we have a meeting once a year of all these major Jewish groups.
2 minutes, yeah.
Okay, a very quick story. So they revealed this study from the Jewish federations at this recent meeting. And there is different people from, there's some people from Hillel and Jewish federations. And also was sitting there the head of the Reform movement. And at the end of the day, we all had to give our assessments, what we felt about the meeting. And he turns to everybody and says, you know what I've been thinking the whole day? We need to learn from Chabad how to love your fellow Jew. So this is a private meeting. It's not like the guy turned up in a Chabad shul and he wants to make us feel good. This is a private meeting, only with principals. The only non-head of an organization is me. And he tells everybody we need to learn from us. What I'm saying is, I think today there's there may be people who have theological and philosophical disagreements with us, or they may think our strategy is not the best and they have a better strategy. I can live with that. But respect for our success and respect for our contribution is profound.
So what I was asking was, from the Chabad perspective, do they like give you the respect, and they really see that what you're doing for them?
I feel very strongly that from within
leadership,
the leadership of Chabad has been extremely supportive of what I've done. And I think they've seen many, many benefits in many different ways. Some of them have been financial support to Chabad organizations. And some have been the fact that the way we are seen today is as one of the most important movements today in the Jewish world. I think we are the largest Jewish organization in the world, but I think we've created very, very strong relations that have been really, really good. And we've been able to help and solve a lot of problems sometimes in a quiet way all over the world. The best diplomacy is not the one you do on the front pages of the New York Times.
Right. Now, I know that you've had